Is someone sabotaging? Chinese public humiliates Xi's works. Shocking. China's pension system collapse endangers hundreds of millions. Mainland internet shocked to see how to identify a dictatorship video. 30 years of the internet in China, what has it brought to the people? Beijing issues new laws to punish Taiwan independence, imposes possible death sentence. It's all covered in today's China Truths. Is someone sabotaging? Chinese public humiliates Xi's works. Recently, social media has been circulating images showing noteworthy arrangements of books in bookstores in many areas in China. In detail, according to The Sound of Hope, a particular photo from a Hangzhou bookstore shows the novel Regime Change placed next to the 2023 edition of Xi Jinping's Thoughts on Socialism with Chinese Characteristics for a New Era Study Guide. This arrangement appears to subtly suggest Xi Jinping should resign. These images, fervently circulated online, come from cities including Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Hong Kong. It is unclear whether these displays were orchestrated by bookstore staff or intentionally created by patrons. In addition to these, books such as For Whom the Bell Tolls and The Collapse of Great Powers have been strategically placed around Xi Jinping's writings. Moreover, similar setups have been widely shared on Platform X, with photos sourced from bookstores across China. Prominent among Xi Jinping's publications are books titled Regime Change, Winnie the Pooh, The Collapse of a Great Power, The Trial of Hitler, and Qin Shi Huang, the first and greatest emperor of all time. Wan Zhi, a Swedish literary scholar and translator, commented on the situation, noting that direct opposition is not feasible under Xi's oppressive regime. He pointed out that the strategic positioning of books in bookstores clearly indicates that Xi Jinping has lost the public support. In a related incident at Harbin Engineering University, several books authored by Xi Jinping were found discarded in a recycling area. Notable titles, including Xi Jinping in Jingding and On the Party's Self-Revolution, were discovered, with 4 copies of Xi Jinping in Jingding still in their original shrink wrap. This act of discarding the books, without unwrapping them, clearly demonstrates the discarder's disdain for these works. Shocking. China's pension system collapse endangers hundreds of millions. China has 200 million people employed in flexible jobs, but only 50 million of them contribute to Social Security. This statistic sharply slaps the face of those experts and enthusiasts who praise China's economy every day. The pension system operates on a pay-as-you-go basis, meaning the contributions from young workers are used to pay the pensions of the elderly. The fact that 150 million people choose not to contribute to Social Security indicates that the pension deficit will continue to grow as the population ages. Why does the CCP encourage the birth of more children and the relaxation of restrictions? It's because there aren't enough leaks left to cut. On social media platforms in China, a blogger has commented that in Wuhan, the number of young people not participating in Social Security is noticeably high. For example, a young man born after 2000, during a job interview, immediately asked how much extra money he could get if he opted out of Social Security. Today's youth are not only avoiding childbirth, marriage, and purchasing homes, but now they are also not participating in Social Security, effectively cutting off their own safety nets completely. When asked why, they argue confidently, minor illnesses can be managed, serious illnesses don't need attention, and having health insurance is optional. Future generations will have their own fortune. If I have no descendants, I will enjoy my own fortune. The current decline in participation rates is not only due to a shift in the attitudes of young people but is also significantly influenced by the job market. Following the removal of mask mandates, the employment environment has been unstable, particularly for those in small business, delivery drivers, and young entrepreneurs whose irregular incomes cannot cover their daily expenses, let alone afford Social Security. Recently, the topic of a 3% increase in pension funds in China has topped the trending searches on Weibo. This implies that the pensions for the elderly are set to increase again. It is well known that the pension shortfall in China has now expanded into the trillions. According to official data, in 2021, the National Pension Insurance Fund faced a shortfall of nearly 700 billion yuan, about $96.4 billion US, with 300 million people collecting pensions. Over the next 5 to 10 years, the pension shortfall in China is projected to increase to between 8 to 10 trillion yuan, approximately from 1.1 trillion to 1.4 trillion US. With such a massive deficit and with pensions still on the rise, young people will need to contribute more to Social Security to plug the holes. Mainland Internet shocked to see how to identify a dictatorship video. Togolese democracy activist Farida Bembenabarima, in a 2019 TED Talk organized by a non-profit media group, explored the theme "Does your country risk becoming a dictatorship?" and outlined several identifying features of dictatorships. Surprisingly, this talk has recently gained traction on mainland China's internet, prompting widespread public discourse. Presently, the video remains accessible on the Chinese video platform Bilibili, where Nabarima disclosed that Togo, a country in West Africa, was governed by the same family for 51 years. She shared her personal ordeal, stating that she was just 13 when her father was arrested and tortured by the dictatorial regime, an experience that propelled her into the democratic movement. However, this involvement led to persecution for her and her family, preventing her return to Togo for many years. In her talk, Nabarima enumerated several traits typical of a dictatorship for the audience's reference. She began with centralized power, where a nation's authority is hoarded by a select few or the elite, often personified by a strongman viewed as a savior, a scenario Togo was familiar with. Her second point was political propaganda, where dictators sustain their rule by crafting a savior-like persona, projecting themselves as indispensable, without whom the nation would disintegrate. She noted that dictators often frame their governance as a defense against foreign interference, thereby justifying the prohibition of any contact between the public and external forces. Nabarima then described militarization as a further attribute, where dictators exploit the military to stifle dissent, effectively using fear as a tool. The fourth trait she discussed was human abuse, where the regime's methods of oppression are unimaginably brutal. She illustrated this with a stark reality faced by Togolese: if they opposed the leadership, they had to flee the country or face disappearance. This video has sparked debates among Chinese netizens, with reactions ranging from disbelief and accidental views to forebodings about its imminent removal. However, some commenters expressed strong agreement and support for Nabarima, directly correlating the discussed traits with conditions in China. Furthermore, on May 10 this year, the U.S. Congressional Executive Commission on China issued its 2023 annual report on China's human rights and legal conditions. It highlighted the eruption of the White Paper movement, the most significant protest since 1989, spurred by stringent 3-year-long COVID-19 policies. The report criticized the Chinese Communist Party for its censorship and restrictions on personal freedoms and called for political reforms. The report also covered issues such as forced labor, global repression tactics, the incarceration of mainland human rights defenders and Hong Kong political prisoners, genocide in Xinjiang, religious suppression, and the erosion of minority languages and cultures in Tibet and Xinjiang, condemning the CCP's persistent human rights abuses. A new section titled Technology-Enhanced Authoritarianism was added this year, examining how the CCP employs modern technology to conduct global surveillance and suppress freedoms. Furthermore, an international human rights organization released data in June on the human rights situation in over 30 countries and regions, revealing China to be at the bottom in several indicators. The situation in Hong Kong has also worsened, nearing mainland China's levels. Talia Kehoe-Roden, spokesperson for the Human Rights Measurement Initiative, noted that this survey has been conducted in China for 4 years, and China consistently ranks among the lowest. 30 years of the Internet in China, what has it brought to the people? This year, 2024, celebrates the 30th anniversary of China's full connection to the global Internet, marked by the Chinese Communist Party's Internet Conference taking place from July 9 to 11 in Beijing. 3 decades ago, China achieved a complete Internet connection through the establishment of international dedicated lines, officially heralding the advent of the Internet era in China. State-controlled media claim that netizens are a crucial component of the Chinese Internet. The rise of mobile Internet has been instrumental in expanding the number of Internet users, who numbered 1.079 billion by June 2023, the highest globally. Despite this, many of these netizens view the yearly World Internet Conference with skepticism, especially given the extensive Internet firewall in China. Lai Jianping, a former Beijing lawyer and current chair of the Federation for a Democratic China Canada, asserts that China has never truly had full functional exposure to the international Internet. It selectively reveals content, all under the CCP's constraints on free speech and press, effectively stripping Chinese citizens of their right to information. The CCP blocks any content it perceives as a threat to its authoritarian regime. Consequently, those in China who wish to gain insight into the outside world must resort to bypassing the firewall, as even basic Western social media platforms remain inaccessible. Zhong Shan, a senior network engineer from Silicon Valley, clarifies that the CCP's connection to the Internet was not a result of embracing it but was facilitated by the perfection of the firewall's functions. Reflecting on earlier Internet freedoms, Zhong Shan said that he was among the first to experience an era where everything was accessible on Google, and everyone could use Gmail. However, this openness was short-lived as new technological restrictions soon made these fundamental services like Gmail and Google sites inaccessible, and many domestic BBS forums were also shut down. This scenario essentially reflects the CCP talking to itself. The initiative was flawed from the beginning. To combat perceived threats of terrorism and anti-government actions, the CCP implemented the cybersecurity law on June 1, 2017, granting the government extensive control over the Internet during emergencies. Zhong Shan highlights the oppressive nature of this legislation. The law itself has established over 150 regulations. This abundance of laws was not intended to protect freedoms but to restrict them. It was not aimed at fostering a better Internet or public opinion environment but rather at intensifying suppression. The Internet firewall is used to monitor and suppress even those mildly critical of the regime, including those merely expressing their grievances online, who face bans and account suspensions. Furthermore, Lai Jianping criticizes the excessive legal restrictions, indicating that they do not signify genuine Internet freedom or free speech for the Chinese populace. The multitude of laws and regulations does not equate to real Internet freedom or the existence of a fully functional Internet in China. Instead, these laws are employed to curb free speech, prevent the free flow of information online, restrict the expression of opinions, and isolate Chinese citizens from the global community. Additionally, the regime permits only a limited scope of approved information to be disclosed to the Chinese public, who are subjected to repeated scrutiny and censorship. This includes blocking all Western social media platforms, ensuring that the only information available to the Chinese people is that which the CCP decides to release. Thus, the vast expanse of information available to the rest of the world remains out of reach for the Chinese public. As previously reported, the article "The Chinese Internet is Rapidly Collapsing" is gaining traction online, claiming that nearly all information posted on Chinese news portals, blogs, forums, and social media between 1995 and 2005 has vanished. Essentially, collective memory is being erased from the Chinese Internet. Beijing issues new laws to punish Taiwan independence, imposes possible death sentence. On June 21, China's top judicial and security bodies, including the Supreme Court, Supreme Procuratorate, Ministry of Public Security, Ministry of State Security, and Ministry of Justice, held a joint press conference at the Taiwan Affairs Office, unveiling new guidelines for punishing individuals deemed to be advocating Taiwanese independence. The opinions on punishing crimes of separating the country and inciting separatism by Taiwan independence diehards according to law, comprising 22 provisions, detail specific actions that will be considered criminal offenses under the law. The guidelines were immediately effective upon their announcement. In detail, the opinions categorize the crime of splitting the country to include actions like advocating for Taiwan's participation in international organizations that are typically reserved for sovereign states. Furthermore, the opinions explicitly define several forms of criminal activities. Firstly, the initiation and creation of Taiwan independence separatist organizations, and the planning or drafting of action programs, plans, or schemes advocating Taiwan independence. Secondly, engaging in legislative or regulatory changes, interpretations, or repeals within the Taiwan region, or using mechanisms such as public voting, aiming to alter Taiwan's legal status as a part of China. Thirdly, attempting to include Taiwan in international organizations reserved for sovereign nations, or facilitating official foreign interactions or military connections to foster a global perception of two Chinas, one China and one Taiwan, or Taiwan independence. Fourthly, manipulating one's official authority in areas like education, culture, history, or media to distort the reality that Taiwan is part of China. Lastly, engaging in any other concerted efforts to separate Taiwan from China. Notably, individuals who organize, plan, and execute activities aimed at detaching Taiwan from China will be prosecuted and sentenced for the crime of splitting the country, according to Article 103, Clause 1 of the Criminal Law. The leading offenders, or those whose actions are considered particularly severe, could face life imprisonment or a fixed-term imprisonment of at least 10 years. For those whose actions are deemed to pose an exceptional danger to the nation and its people, or whose actions are particularly egregious, the death penalty may be imposed. Participants who are actively involved will be subject to a fixed-term imprisonment ranging from 3 to 10 years, while those less involved could face up to 3 years of fixed-term imprisonment, detention, surveillance, or deprivation of political rights. This information has sparked widespread criticism among observers and dissidents. Former lawyer from Beijing, Li Jianping, criticized the measure, stating that the autocratic Communist Party, through its highest prosecutorial and judicial bodies, as well as its public and state security departments, is flaunting its own laws. However, these actions demonstrate its firm resolve to harshly penalize those it labels as Taiwan independence proponents. CCP's opinions contravene Chinese law, set to enforce vicious punishments. Li Jianping explained to Sound of Hope that operating as an autocratic regime, the Communist Party traditionally disregards legal norms, with no real commitment to the rule of law. Thus, whether it's official laws, departmental regulations, administrative regulations, judicial interpretations, or even a notification, a response, an explanation, or a policy, these can be brazenly implemented across society. Many of their policies lack a legal basis, yet they still function effectively in practice. Hence, we cannot evaluate this using the legislative processes typical of civilized nations. Rather, we must acknowledge that since several departments within the Communist Party have issued this interpretation, it signals their intention to proceed in this manner, regardless of its alignment or conflict with the laws they have established. They are resolutely intent on inflicting exceptionally vicious punishment on what they label as Taiwan independence. Adding more comments, Australian scholar Li Yuanhua remarked, "This is quite absurd." It also indicates the CCP's desperation regarding the situation in Taiwan. Their actions are malicious, employing this form of legal interpretation and notification, which itself does not adhere to the legal protocols of mainland China. What is the rush to issue this? Fundamentally, it serves to intimidate people across all layers of Taiwanese society. The CCP perceives any assertion of Taiwan's sovereignty, democracy, and freedom as a great disrespect, deserving severe punishment. This also unveils that the CCP lacks substantive strategies for addressing the issues with Taiwan, hence they engage in psychological warfare, cultivating a climate of fear. On June 16, the Financial Times disclosed that Xi Jinping had informed European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen last year that Washington was attempting to incite Beijing to attack Taiwan, but he would not take the bait. Li Jianping interprets this as a sign from Xi Jinping indicating his reluctance to initiate a conflict with Taiwan. Given Xi Jinping's ambition to become a lifelong ruler, a war in the Taiwan Strait could result in the CCP's defeat, potentially leading to economic collapse, international sanctions, societal disruption, and even the collapse of the regime, posing too great a risk. Consequently, Xi Jinping is unlikely to engage in military aggression against Taiwan. He also noted, as the global community advances pragmatic diplomacy with Taiwan, particularly in vital sectors like the high-tech semiconductor industry, which now forms a critical part of the global supply chain. Moreover, the Taiwanese government, led by Lai Ching-te, remains undeterred by the Communist Party's threats and incentives, steadfastly defending the Taiwanese way of life with honor and standing firm against the Communist Party. Lai Ching-te has consistently declared that the People's Republic of China and the Republic of China are two independent political entities, neither subordinate to the other, a stance widely supported by the Taiwanese populace. The CCP finds it challenging to suppress the Taiwanese independence movement. On one hand, they lack the capability for military confrontation, and on the other, the forces advocating for Taiwanese independence continue to grow and remain indomitable. Therefore, they resort to extreme measures, acting without restraint to deter and frighten not only the Taiwanese but also people globally. According to the current stance of the Communist Party, anyone purportedly involved in promoting or inciting Taiwanese independence is deemed criminal, claiming extraterritorial jurisdiction over such offenses. In response to the latest move of the CCP, on the 21st, the Mainland Affairs Council, the Taiwanese body responsible for cross-strait relations, declared, the 23 million citizens of Taiwan are entitled to inalienable freedoms, democracy, and rights as per the Constitution of the Republic of China. The Beijing authorities have absolutely no judicial jurisdiction over Taiwan, and thus, the so-called laws and standards set by the CCP do not bind our citizens. The government calls on the public to stay calm and not to be swayed by the CCP's threats and intimidation tactics. The Mainland Affairs Council emphasized that the conduct of the Beijing authorities tends to incite discord among the populations across the straits, heavily disrupting the flow of people and interactions between them. The Council also reiterates its caution to Taiwanese residents to thoroughly evaluate the necessity of trips to mainland China and urges Taiwanese currently in mainland China to remain vigilant about their personal safety. Don't forget to leave a comment in the section below to share your opinions on today's topic with us. Make sure to like and subscribe to see more interesting topics from China Truths.